Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Lunar Alchemy. I'm John. I'm here with Bella for our regular Monday discussion. Although today it's kind of a special day in terms of the galactic calendar, also known as the day out of time. That kind of goes into some sidebars that we won't get into today because we're here to talk about the archetype of the president and gene key 31, which is where the sun has entered transit here today. And we're going to be discussing this frequency range that takes us from the shadow of arrogance to the city of humility through the gift of leadership. And I think this is a very, very interesting gene key to understand, especially in terms of the words that are used to describe this energy band, the ways that we understand what arrogance means, what leadership means, and indeed even what humility means, all take on a particular perspective within the framework of this gene key, which we can fully understand through language. And so this is one of those interesting gene keys as part of the codon ring of no return, the 31 and the 62 together. So this particular shadow of arrogance has a tie-in to the shadow of intellect, which we covered a few weeks back. So this is an evolving exploration of this energy. So I think that gets us introduced. Bella, how are you feeling moving into the energies of the president now that we've graduated from the comedian, which I have to say, it was a really heavy comedian. I mean, sometimes there are, like big comedians that are really funny. This one felt really big.
Yeah, I feel like I stepped into some different comedian costumes that I don't usually express. So I was a little bit surprised by that. And I also felt there was some new energy that I usually don't embody. Yeah, even like I mean, not to kind of say on here that I'm an aggressive person, but I got really like angry with a window cleaner, and I like did like this, so I kind of scratched my hand open here, and then I throw it on the floor, and I had like window cleaner all over. And I don't usually get in contact with my anger. I usually got in contact with my disappointment of the broken trust or something. So to even like, I wish I would have recorded myself like with that bottle. And there was a different kind of energy. And maybe because we were speaking on the last call about Uranus and Mars and the North Node coming together, and I do feel like there is some stepping out from old limitations. And even how I'm looking now, I was just jumping on my rebounder because what I felt in the transit call before, we were about 15 people from the inner circle, and I could feel like so much energy transmuting, and some of us struggling with kind of even getting to it, and some of us like beautifully connecting to the humanness of like how leadership and where leadership lives inside of us. And what I felt after the call was that need to move the energy. So here in Leo, I feel like Leo is to be on stage, and it's going to move the energy. It's going to burn the energy that's in the way of that leadership. And here with the 31, it's also to check ourselves for the arrogance that can come with the Leo energy, with the president energy, with that defined or that definition or activation with the throat that the 31 has. And I was saying in the call just before as well, using that 31 to connect and not disconnect, because that arrogance, and especially for me who has in a 6th line, that objectivity can kind of be quite cold and quite like sharp. And I know as a 4-6, maybe it feels like I'm right and that I did make my point, but does it lead to more connection and more trust? Or does it just lead to me kind of period, and then nobody else responds? And is that really what I want? That, I guess, would be where I would come in from the shadow frequency with a little bit of warning. There is no return. Once you cut something through with your word, there might not be any return. So that energy, being careful, knowing how powerful it is with the 31 and with the 62. And the 62 is really going to bring in the detail so that the 31, which are both logical and part of the collective circuitry, so that there is nothing to respond in a way. But that can create, like I said, disconnection as much as anything else.
Yeah, I feel like this theme of humanness and what you're bringing up between how do we use our words to create connection or disconnection is a very strong theme that this energy is bringing for us. And I haven't considered some of the other lines, but I feel very certain that for both fifth lines and sixth lines, this 31 is a very, very definitive gene key in terms of understanding how to bring that fifth line energy or that sixth line energy to the collective in a manner that is actually in service rather than slinking around in the shadows or staying above and beyond the collective's influence. Because this 31, while the word that we use to describe the gift is leadership, this energy doesn't manifest with the tendency to take on the role of leadership. The leadership is more of a collective projection. So it's almost as if a fifth line is out on their balcony and all of the collective gathers around and projects onto this person just based on the way that they are. Another way to look at that through the sixth line, as you were saying, Bella, is to use a perspective, to use words in a manner of speaking that generates separation between self and other. And that's a real common experience for six lines as they go through the different stages of their 3-chapter life, particularly around that roof phase, wanting to kind of stay apart from the collective and make observations can be extraordinarily tempting to use one's words, judgments, perceptions, and observations to serve arrogance. And even that word arrogance, we have to kind of reconsider in the context of this gene key, because it's not about a behavior. It's simply about the fact that we are by nature conditioned by the languages or the language which we speak and understand. And to some extent, therefore, we do not control language. Language controls us. And part of our deconditioning process through practicing through the human design or contemplating the gene keys is about regaining our mastery, or gaining for the first time our mastery of language, so that it is not imprisoning us and we are able to use it for the purposes for which we are best built in order to serve the collective. So to me, when I think about all of these things, I'm like, wow, that is a radical vision of what leadership can be. And when it becomes embraced, it really begins to show something that Richard Rudd is pointing to as he discusses this gene key, which is collective leadership rather than individual leadership. So, Bella, I wonder if you just have some perspectives on where we're at in the collective and as individuals with this process of evolution through gene key 31. You know, every time the sun moves through this transit, we're getting a really powerful blast of solar energies moving through this leadership and all truly all of the frequencies of this gene key. And then as the moon comes up, we're getting a powerful reflection of any areas in which we are still imprisoned by language and are therefore subject to arrogance. So how are we doing as individuals and as a collective in this evolutionary process?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I always know I'm going to get a great answer when you pause for a while to think about something. That's no pressure. It just, it tumbles out of you.
I think the important thing here is that the 31 is always coupled with the 41. That feels like that's when you're saying what's activated right now. So when the sun is in the 31, the earth is in the 41. And the 41 is the anticipation of what's coming. And it's telling us you have the fuel to experience what it is that's coming. And I believe really that when we look at the 31, it's now asking us to facilitate in the now the change, and it's also asking us to have that vision of the future. And the 41, that is the earth placement, is showing us how we start to anticipate what's coming. And I believe with the nodes right now in Scorpio and in Taurus, things are shaking. And like we were speaking about last call, that conjunction with Mars, with Uranus, and the North Node in Gate 2, that's going to happen now in less than a week. It's change or it's change. And I feel like it's so perfect that right now we all have the sun in Leo, and it's speaking about actually that personal leadership more than anything else. And then at the same time, I mean, it's that axis about Aquarius and Leo. How do I step up to my leadership so that we in the transpersonal Aquarius can walk into the future together? I feel at this time it's not a philosophy anymore. It's not like something we're thinking about the future. The future is happening, or the breaking down of the systems, the breaking down of what we could count on, quote unquote, before. It's already trembling, definitely. And I feel that the only way of not seeing that is if we are distracted or sleeping. And definitely, I do feel more tangible, the sleeping and the awake. It's almost like it's boiling down to the simple of Taurus, of actually translating things very simple. Or you're sleeping and you don't realize what's going on, or you're awake and you can start anticipating the patterns that are going to work in the future. And those patterns are always going to be unique for the individual. There is a trend, there is a bigger perspective, but there is always coming back to the truth of you. And if you're not in your body, if you haven't woken up to your own passenger consciousness, as we do in human design, I believe that it's going to be easy to kind of take all kinds of steps that aren't aligned with you. So coming back home, so that you can feel from the inside in every moment, where you're at and how you're navigating seems important. So I believe, sadly and kind of powerfully at the same time, I do believe that there is a bit of a split where some of us are waking up to our leadership, which is more than anything just being able to respond to life right now. I think last year I said thinking on your feet. The 31 and the 41 is saying, okay, there's a coconut falling in my head. We don't know what's going to fall in our head tomorrow, or what's going to tremble in the ground where we are right now. So that's in that moment, how grounded are you in your truth, in yourself, in your presence, so that you can respond to that in a way that is the most constructive possible for you.
Yeah, so what that makes me think about is, coming awake to the inner form of leadership that we have access to. I feel as if it has everything to do with our conditioning. As children, some people, depending on the personality that they've developed and perhaps to some extent the energies that they carry, they are conditioned by the relationships that are formed and by the authority figures in their life to take on roles of leadership, to aspire to roles of leadership. And that conditioning, that aspiration to leadership leads people on the pathways that can put you into leadership in government or leadership in business, whether that's owning your own company or becoming a CEO within a larger company or some type of management position. Our society seems to inherently reward leadership, whether it's through money or status or opportunity. And it very much, this is kind of odd. I feel as if our society judges a pathway where one might be considered a follower, while at the same time, the conditioning of our society encourages us to be followers in some realm or another. And this juxtaposition, there's a codependency between this form of aspirational leadership and this form of conditioned, I don't know what the word is exactly for it, but it's this relationship between the sheep and the shepherd. And, you know, when we're talking about people coming awake, you know, on social media, there was all this, I mean, it's kind of died down, which I'm really glad about. I feel like in the last year or so. But for a while, I just felt like everybody who was becoming aware of more aspects of reality than are obvious on the surface, we're almost screaming at the collective, calling everybody a sheep and telling them all to wake up. You know, it's like being in George Orwell's The Farm, and you know, the pig is running around trying to warn all the other animals that this isn't right, stuff is going to go badly here, like we've got to get out. And it really strikes me that that whole situation of where we're all in the animal farm and some people are screaming, wake up sheep, and other people are you know, kind of going through their process. It doesn't really matter which side you're on, whether you're trying to forge your own path, aspiring to leadership, or you're following others who you believe are forging a path to freedom. Everybody's in the shadow field when we're in that kind of environment. So I'm wondering, Bella, what you see as really defining the difference between leadership that exists in a shadow realm, which we might call arrogance, and leadership that exists in a gift realm, because it exists in both places. And it's like, whether you're in the shadows or you're in the gifts, I feel like almost specifically in the shadows, anybody engaging in leadership is saying, I do what I do for the good of the collective. What does a leader in the gifts say, and why are they different from that form of leadership in the shadows?
Yeah. I was looking the other day at Hitler's chart. Ashley and I were on I think it was the 21 that we were recording about, which is that tribal leadership. And he doesn't have that. He doesn't have the 45. But I believe he has the 31-7 that I have. And he has the same nodes as I have, the 39-6 and the 8, 6. There are so many similarities in Hitler's chart. He has the 2.4 in his Mercury and his Venus, which is my life's work. It's like, it's very, very similar to my chart. And why do some leaders have the shadow as their, light in a way? Like, kind of how it feels like, how do some leaders turn it upside down? I don't know. Like, that could be a whole discussion. And I feel that maybe where I want to take this is more for those of us who are aspiring to a leadership that is constructive. What is it that sometimes can take us into the shadow? And my own process today, when I was thinking about what do I care about, because I feel like there has to be something in leadership that is actually charged. Like, you can't have a battery that's empty and have leadership around it. You actually need to have a charged battery and care about it. And for me, the word was transformation, because in everything that I go, I feel that's what I care about, and that's the transformation of, like, the future that we are walking into together. And at the same time, when I was feeling into that word, I realized, going deeper and taking off the layers, that when I say transformation, it could also, in the shadow frequency, come from a fear that there would be no purpose. Because what if everything stays the same? What if we continue kind of like in the ground, like not getting anywhere and not awakening and not becoming wiser? What if? And that my leadership of transformation, or my aspiring leadership of transformation, could come from the fear that there is no purpose, or that there is no purpose with pain, if I even go deeper and deeper into what it is. So my leadership could be a reaction to the thing that I can't accept, which in many senses, with everything that my experiences in this lifetime, is that, why is there pain? What's the purpose? So I could come up with a leadership and kind of be that Leo Aquarius person that goes for that in the world, so I don't have to feel the pain, which is similar what we see with our vocation, that sometimes, we are actually fueling something in order to not feel the core wound. So for me, what it feels like is that that's the question, and that's in a way the fear that I'm here to purify. And when I have purified that fear, I am sure that my leadership is going to be transformational, but not from me running away from my fear of not having a purpose, or pain not being a purpose. Yeah, does that resonate? Can you see along these lines, John?
Yeah, for sure. So when I think about what you're sharing about, and bringing up about this underlying fear that could be driving our, whether it's our egos or our personalities, or it's driving the energy that's coming through us. And you have the 731, I have the 7, no 31 in my in my just a hanging gate there. What it brings me to actually is the 7, which, when we look at leadership within the 64 gene key matrix, Richard Rudd, in his description of the 31, actually identifies the 7 as the true leadership gene key amongst all of the 64. But it's not the gene key that the collective thrusts the projection of leadership onto. It's the gene key that carries the heart of leadership. And when I look at fear and the true sources of fear, when we consider it from gene key 62 and the intellect, the very first thing that we've been conditioned to understand is that the base fear of everything in our experience is death. I think anybody that's on a spiritual path has learned that information, thought about it with their brains, and realized, oh yeah, that's true. But how many human beings have actually stood on the precipice of death and truly felt that fear? Now, obviously we have a lot of ways to experience that fear. And I'm not trying to suggest that the fear of death isn't at the base of it all. But when I think about fear and how it drives or motivates our actions in today's society that is overall predominantly safe, until you end up in a war-torn country where there's an invasion and all of that, most of the time, people are not concerned about being killed just by stepping outdoors on a daily basis. And so our fear of death is actually transferred into a fear of the what I might call the death of what lies inside our hearts. And we can see this translated into the fear of that drives the protection of children, that drives the innocence of children. What are we protecting? We're protecting their hearts. Of course, we're protecting their bodies too. But when people in a safe, generally speaking, safe society are protecting their children, they're generally not protecting them that often truly from an existential physical threat. Of course, that may come up from time to time. If the kid's going to run into the street, you're going to stop them. But most people think about protecting children from experiences. Oh, don't let that child watch the violent television show, or don't let that child hear the truth about what's really going on in society, because we want to protect their hearts, the innocence. And so I see so many motivations of fear being driven by the depths of what lies inside our heart, the values and that innocence that we are an absolute expression of as children, if we were lucky enough to grow up in an environment that allowed for that level of expression. And through our conditioning, we learn to create layer upon layer of protection over our hearts. And when we do that, for those of us who have the power of influence, if the gene key 31 is alive in us, it automatically comes out as arrogance, because we're not allowing what's in the center, the deepest part of our hearts, to be expressed through the power of our influence. And that power of influence is scary because it's vulnerable. If you step out on a balcony and shout to the collective, hey, everybody, here's the most vulnerable aspect of my inner being that is the most important thing to me on this entire planet. Will you join me? And they all take out cabbages and tomatoes and throw them at you and like jeer and, humiliate you off the balcony. That's a devastating blow to the development and the well-being of our experience as an ego-driven being. So when you're talking, Bella, about this kind of motivation out of fear and what could be driving our sort of what our intellect says is a beneficial for the collective or whatever, I want to know how we can find our ways to the center of our hearts through that process, by experiencing that fear, by feeling that fear and allowing it to penetrate the depths of our heart, so that we can begin to give voice to what lives inside there. And it feels to me that every human being who does that, regardless of what's in their charts or whatever, they've tapped into the true gift of gene key 31. No matter how it manifests in the world, if they're speaking their inner depths of truth from inside their heart and allowing that to be given voice, whether it's with one person, the one person that you trust the most and you share that thing with, or you are on the balcony and you're shouting it to the masses. It doesn't matter. That leadership is manifesting through you. And the more you give voice to it, I believe the more the collective will project that image of leadership onto you. And the more you will be thrust into that role, whether or not you desire to play that role or intended to play that role, maybe I should say, because when you're thrust into that role, I can't imagine you would be doing anything other than the work that comes from connecting with the depths of your own heart. So how could you not desire to want to do that work, no matter how hard it looks, if you're receiving all of that support? So
yeah, I feel that could take us back to that exercise. What do I care about? Because that's the heart. What do you care about? Then that charged battery inside of you, love and care of connection, that is a place there. And then you could say that any leadership, like Hitler's leadership, that came from fear, having to do something before you can speak that voice. Like the world would be a better place if we eradicated this kind of people, these kinds of people. And even what I was saying, for me, the world would be a better place if I could prove that there is a purpose with pain, or why don't I just start to live what I care about instead of trying to prove something? And that would be an arrogance in a way, because like I say, sometimes for me, the ultimate arrogance for me has been to battle with God. Like I feel like I'm doing this with him or her or it's because I feel like something's unfair, for example, or I'm playing God, thinking if I take all this on and I make life better for these people that I care about, then no, who am I to play God in that sense? I can play God for myself. But really, sometimes I feel we take on a responsibility that isn't ours, and that is kind of arrogance. Yeah, I have a few other ways maybe we can look at the 31, but what is there anything with this that you kind of want to develop, John, before we kind of move on to maybe looking at a different understanding?
I'd say let's look at something. There's something kind of like nagging on my brain, but I like to see where you want to go, and I have a feeling it'll just tie into where that is. One we haven't really discussed humility much, and when we look at the archetype of the president, what the heck does that even mean? What's, in our society today, there's no way to be truly humble and become the president of the United States or the president of some giant corporation. I mean, maybe that's an overstatement or an overgeneralization. Perhaps there are some truly humble people serving in those roles today. But if you look at the CEOs who are society's models, the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates and the Elon Musk and these Richard Branson and these types of people, these are people that we don't necessarily associate with humility exactly. There's a certain arrogance that surrounds all of those figures that I mentioned. And not to say that those are the only leaders that we have. They're just the CEOs of some of the largest tech companies and entrepreneurial companies that we have. So
I would again say the human pathway is always the gift, and we cannot be in human form and become the city. And here we have a word that we kind of use it in every day, but in this context of leadership, I would say it's not that the goal is the city. The city is kind of the essence that stays after once you're gone in some other form. So maybe not even try to put that in together here. I would possibly say.
I think actually to a certain element of even contemplating the cities expresses or demonstrates how impacted we all are by the shadow of arrogance. And I actually loved Richard Rudd's description of what humility in human form might look like, which is in the 64 ways. He describes a fully conscious and aware Judas who performs his role knowing that throughout time he would be villainized as the one who betrayed the Son of God, and accepted his role and played it out anyways. He said like that's like the epitome of humility, of just accepting and playing out the role. So I mean, I thought that was a significant sort of suggestion about it. And when you actually think about the possibility of that, at least from the perspective of the story as it's told today, it's really impossible. There's no way that could be, a person who's humble wouldn't take their own life out of guilt or shame or whatever, So.
Well, there is a spark somewhere of like like I guess what you're saying. So if you haven't read the book, I Remember Union, I would say go there. That is the closest to what you're saying, I would say. Coming in knowing that we have a mission here and having forgotten the vision, and then the mission and the vision, and then having to live our design. And that's how they describe it in the book, not even speaking about human design. And at the end of the day, there was a reason for Judas, according to that book, because he was going to have to be alone, and he was going to have to find that self-confidence in being alone. It's a beautiful book, and it's very, I smile when I read the book, and the way that they're using design, because the way that we understand design when we are in these systems, it's kind of like, yeah, of course, they are speaking about design as the blueprint. And it's like, it's a perfect correlation. And it's just a very beautiful book showing us where we're going after 2,000 years, and what we are remembering after 2,000 years. That's actually the leadership of the heart in each one of us. So that would definitely be, if there's one book you want to read in this transit or get in this transit, I Remember Union would be the book. And maybe that from there we go to a different way of seeing it. So here I'm bringing in again something that isn't even in English. This is the symbol for Jinki 31. And the verb is to fall in love with. And I feel this is kind of telling here, because if we say that this is the leader that is chosen by the people, and that is in a way a little bit reluctant to even lead, like what is it to choose somebody? Like what you were saying, the true choosing is with a heart, John. So to actually fall in love is the only way of in a way trusting somebody to kind of walk into the future. And I love how it's a walking together, it's a facilitating leadership. It's not somebody who's walking on the front, but it's actually together in love, in heart, we're walking towards the future. And I even see, when I see the symbol, I feel like a harp or something harmonic, that you're playing something in harmony. And the other keywords here are, fall in love with, so that we can take initiative, so that we can walk, right? And then this is interesting because this actually comes from the geometry of the inside trigrams within the hexagram. So here we have one, and here we have one. And that is work on what you're radiating, or work with what you're radiating. And that comes from having a heaven hexagram trigram in there. And what is that? The green is
wind.
A wind, exactly, a wind hexagram. So then, and you could say that the heaven is a lot of the masculine, the leadership, the Leo energy, and here the wind has a lot of the Virgo energy. So that's also when we say work is Virgo energy and shine is Leo or heaven and a creative energy. So you're actually getting the recipe for what to do in each hexagram by looking at what's inherently true inside of the hexagram. So I just felt for the 31 that like this is a lot, or like this is, but it really kind of shows us how everything is woven together and how the I Ching is so complete in a way. It's so complete, and everything that says in the Gene Keys, we can just actually see it in the geometry of 6 lines that are either yin or yang. So that would be the other way of seeing why is it that the 31 can lead? Because we fall in love with it, or we feel it with the heart. When we feel something with the heart, we are ready to put our vote or our influence to that person. Because if somebody has our heart, like you were saying with the kids, then we can trust it into the future.
Yeah, I think since you're on that, when we look at that hexagram and we see the lake over the mountain, the lake is the joyous and the mountain is stillness. So it's joy on a foundation of stillness. And if there isn't a better description for living from the heart, of initiating from the heart, I don't really know what is. I mean, joy clearly comes from the heart, but one can only have clear initiative if those actions are taken from the stillness, from that lack of fear, essentially. And when you with that, I can't imagine anything happening other than other people who witness you are going to follow, because they're just going to say, wow, that's the way to be, that's the way to go, that's the thing to do, because of the vibration of the energy that comes from that space. So really, really powerful. So Bella, anything to add to conclude our discussion today before we move on to our transmission?
I feel like the light is on the connection between the Ajna and the throat. And there are different kinds of leadership, the collective leadership, the tribal leadership that's more sensing into the past and making sense of that. And then the very creative leadership in the middle that's very individual and unique. And I feel like that's where the sun is shining right now. And as we're going into the future and some of the unexpected changes, I kind of feel for you, whether it doesn't have to be defined at all, but it's that kind of, you kind of choose what leadership you step into. And it is a connection with who you are, your truth, and what you're here to express. And I guess too, like I was saying, sometimes we need to clear out some fears in order to really know what that's about. But it's always something that we have close to our heart, or in our heart, like you were saying, John. So that would be the focus, I would say, this week. And we have a new moon in 3 days. So, that's in the gate of the prodigal. I even think I don't remember if we have gone into the 31 yet, but it's on the cusp. So it's like, what are you a voice for? I guess. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I believe that brings us back to the day out of time. When you look at the ancient calendars that are related to the galactic movements rather than simply our cosmic movements, we come to a series of a period of days that doesn't fit into the number of days that we have in our calendar. And so tomorrow is the first day of a galactic new year. And so having this discussion on this particular day is kind of a perfect time for it, because what better day than to go into the depths of your heart to discover that inner joy and feel into the stillness that is possible as a foundation for that. And then as that new year begins tomorrow, you can step forth expressing that with the power of your influence, no matter how that looks in your experience. And then, of course, we have a new moon to just kind of support, which we're already, coming into the energies of. We have that new moon to support this new movement into a new period of creation in the year. So, every discussion is so different, Bella. I really, I always look forward to seeing how we all come together at the end, and it's pretty neat to go on the journey. So I want to thank everybody for showing up and taking part in our discussion and sharing in the chat. We will conclude our discussion now and open up the room for our transmission with our Lunar Alchemy members. And we will be back next week for the next transit. I believe we have 7 coming up in a couple weeks, but there's something coming up in between. So we've been on this. We did the 62 a few weeks back. Here we are in the 31. Couple weeks we'll be in the 7. This is a big geometry happening in our systems right now. So hang in there and keep doing your contemplations as you do. So thank you all for joining us. I'm sending loving presence to your heart from mine. We'll look forward to seeing you very soon. We'll open up the transmission room now. So bye-bye.